Hello and welcome to Crime Watch Daily Updates. I'm your host, Anna Garcia. Dr. Teresa Sievers was a well-known holistic medicine practitioner from Southwest Florida. Her office was in Bonita Springs. Though she was renowned for her organic remedies, Teresa's death would be anything but natural. On June 28th of 2015, Teresa flew back to Florida from Connecticut, where she and her husband and their two daughters were visiting family. The next morning, Teresa failed to show up for work. One of her friends spoke with Teresa's husband, Mark, and went to their home to conduct a welfare check. When the friend walked inside, he found Teresa beaten to death on the kitchen floor. The killer even left a hammer next to her body with a clump of hair in it. Detectives interviewed Mark Sievers, but he had a rock-solid alibi. He was still in Connecticut when his wife was killed. He told detectives that their marriage was fine, but they argued from time to time. Mark also revealed that he and Teresa experimented with a swingers lifestyle and that he took out a $4.4 million life insurance policy on her. Friends of Teresa, however, told investigators she wanted to divorce Mark. The investigation took a turn in July of 2015 when detectives received a tip from another law enforcement official in Illinois who said that a friend told him that she believed a man named Curtis Wayne Wright could be involved in Teresa's death. Curtis was Mark's childhood friend. Detectives honed in on Curtis and found mountains of evidence that connected him to Teresa's death, even though he lived in Missouri. A GPS used in the rental car that Curtis drove to Florida was registered to a man named Jimmy Rogers. And get this, the GPS had the exact route from Curtis's home in Missouri to Teresa's in Florida. Jimmy and Curtis were eventually arrested, and investigators learned that Mark paid the two men to drive down south and kill his wife. Mark soon got taken into custody as well. Curtis pleaded guilty to second-degree murder charges and testified against Mark and Jimmy during their respective trials. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Jimmy was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He has appealed his conviction. In 2019, a jury found Mark guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder, and a judge sentenced him to death. He has appealed his death sentence, which has made its way all the way to the Florida Supreme Court. However, he remains on death row, and in January of 2022, he asked for a new trial, claiming that he has new evidence. Let's look back at the case of a popular doctor who worked on healing others but could not save herself.
Dr. Sievers was well known in Southwest Florida thanks to numerous articles about her practice where she specialized in hormone therapy.
People have been healing themselves for centuries.
And she had a YouTube channel where she spoke about her brand of alternative medicine.
We really want to get something that's going to help turn down the immune system.
Teresa was at a family gathering in Connecticut with her husband Mark and their two daughters. One Sunday night, she returned home alone. She had patients in the morning. These images of her pulling her luggage at the airport are the last known of her alive.
She's just a wonderful person. So giving.
When Teresa didn't show up for work, Mark, who is also Teresa's business manager, exchanges text messages with Teresa's nurse, Sandra Hoskins. I am checking with doctor as well. She's not answering her phone for me either.
I said, Mark, do you want me to go to your house? And I got one word, no.
Mark then asked another colleague of Teresa's to go by the house. He walked in on a murder scene so bloody, it defies comparison.
911, what is your emergency?
I'm at a friend's house. He's out of town, and I came here to check on his wife, and she's dead on the floor.
He seemed terrified about a killer on the loose.
I'm afraid somebody's in the house. I mean, somebody killed her.
Right.
I mean, it's a murder. Right? She's bashed in the back of the head. My God, she's my friend.
As deputies rushed to the house, Nurse Sandra says she had a chilling phone conversation.
I called Mark and I said, Mark, I know you told me not to go to your house, but I don't know what's going on. And his words were, "Do not tell anyone Doctor is dead."
The door looked like it was jimmied open. Detectives found a crowbar in the grass. On the bloody tile floor in the kitchen, they saw Teresa's wallet, missing a credit card. And right there, the murder weapon, the hammer caked with blood and clumps of hair.
I'm like you and I'm like everybody else. I always want a bad person, particularly a killer, to be in custody as quickly as possible.
Teresa's mother-in-law, Bonnie Sievers, tearfully tells the detective she was at the house the day before. She claims Mark told her not to set the alarm so the dogs wouldn't set off the motion detector.
I really feel that it's my fault.
You cannot blame yourself.
Many began to wonder, was Teresa's killing linked to the mysterious deaths of two other holistic doctors? Jeff Bradstreet and Bruce Hednall died just weeks before Teresa. Some online conspiracy bloggers theorized it could be because all three doctors promoted natural cures instead of pushing pharmaceuticals. But in Teresa's case, Lee County, Florida Sheriff Mike Scott says detectives had a different theory.
I believe, and everything that we have thus far, and it's a lot, lends me to some comfort saying that it's not random and arbitrary.
But soon the investigation turns into something no one imagined. Though Mark has an alibi, being 1,400 miles away in Connecticut, investigators begin to notice strange behavior. Here, he's seen running away from our Fort Myers affiliate WZVN, trying to learn more about his wife's brutal death. He left his wife's office so fast, trash bags were still hanging out of his car window. It's not the first time Mark acted odd. Sandra says at Teresa's funeral, Mark was cold to her, even though they'd been friends for years.
His demeanor and his body language and his character didn't fall into place with a man who was mourning.
As Mark was still hanging out at the family home, detectives soon uncovered some dirty laundry.
She lived on the edge.
Teresa's business partner, Lenka Spiska, told cops Teresa struggled with addiction and with her sexuality.
What type of addiction?
You know, she had an issue with the pot. Then she had, the sexual orientation.
Detectives say Mark told them he and Teresa experimented with other partners in the swinger lifestyle. Mark reportedly claimed Teresa fantasized about his best friend, Curtis Wainwright. He and Mark even looked alike. Dr. Teresa Sievers and her husband Mark seem to live a storybook life at their beautiful house in Bonita Springs, Florida. But the fairy tale was fractured forever when Teresa was bludgeoned to death with a hammer in her own home. Detectives soon found this was no widespread conspiracy to murder holistic doctors. This was closer to home.
We had to connect a lot of dots, cross a lot of T's. We want it to be right.
Detectives say they found those connecting dots in Mark's phone. They say a series of phone calls to a disposable burner phone led them to a double-wide trailer 1,100 miles away in the Missouri Ozarks, and another man named Curtis Wainwright. Curtis and Mark look eerily alike.
We are conducting the video on the interior of the residence.
They soon learned Curtis Wright might hold some intimate clues in the bludgeoning murder of Teresa. Mark reportedly claimed he and Teresa were into a wild swinger lifestyle, and Curtis was Teresa's sexual fantasy. Now cops are asking, did her alleged fantasy come to her house for a secret rendezvous or for murder? Outside the trailer, a silver Hyundai rental car leads to the first damning clue in a long list that will split the investigation wide open. Inside the car, a GPS device reveals a bombshell, Teresa's home address in Bonita Springs. And even more, the GPS is registered to an email address with a different man's name, Jimmy Rogers.
He started asking me questions like what I know about.
Investigators head straight to Jimmy's girlfriend, Taylor, who seems to know a lot.
And I'm like, well, I know you went down there to kill somebody. And then he said, yeah. I said, did you shoot her? And he said, no. And I said, then how'd you kill her? And he made a stupid little chuckle that he does and then said, with a hammer.
Turns out Jimmy had a nickname, the Hammer. And because of what Taylor tells cops, they soon sweep in and arrest both Curtis and Jimmy. Deputies say Jimmy even brought the evidence back with him and told Taylor where he hid it.
Following it is going to be the recovery of overalls.
Detectives say they found bloody overalls Jimmy tossed alongside a rural Missouri highway.
Just please don't touch them or pick them up, but if you can point to, is that the item in question?
Taylor had absolutely nothing to do with the killing and cooperated with investigators. Jimmy's arrest was not a surprise to neighbors in the community about an hour south of St. Louis, who told WZVN Jimmy bragged about the hit.
People kind of knew about it, but nobody really believed him.
He always talked about his favorite weapon was a hammer. And he said that to me multiple times, that his favorite weapon was a hammer.
So why would Wright and Rogers drive some 1,100 miles from Missouri to Florida to allegedly bludgeon Teresa to death? It's a shocker. The sheriff says they were hitmen in a devious murder for hire, but who would employ two killers to kill Teresa? Cops say it was her very own husband, Mark Sievers.
I'm not 100% sure he's got blood in his veins. I think it might be ice.
This exclusive video shot by WZVN shows the actual arrest of Mark Sievers. Deputies took his two daughters out of the home first.
Anything you'd like to say?
So what do cops believe could be the motive? Prosecutors say Teresa and Mark had troubles in the bedroom and with the checkbook. There was an IRS lien on the house for nearly $33,000.
Mark Sievers is present before the court.
But aside from money problems, Mark allegedly had different dollar signs in his eyes. $4.4 million worth. That's the amount of life insurance he held on Teresa. And prosecutors say Mark wanted to cash in, promising to pay the alleged hitmen once he settled.
Wayne Wright, Jimmy Rogers, and Mark Sievers are locked up where they belong, and the daughters will be well cared for.
When confronted with the evidence, Wright ultimately confessed. In chilling detail, he claims he was the first to hit Teresa just a couple of times, but then stopped, saying, "I have shoulder problems, so I guess I wasn't hitting her hard enough." That's when Jimmy, the Hammer, allegedly finished the job. Wright pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He'll serve 25 years in prison, and he will testify against Mark. Jimmy the Hammer Rogers pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. He waived his right to a speedy trial because his lawyers need time to sift through the 50,000 pages of documents.
I have it on a hard drive, and it's ready to review, Your Honor.
And as for Mark Sievers, he's pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty.
Our number one goal here is preservation of life.
And in the middle of a fight for his life, Mark Sievers fought another legal battle over who gets guardianship of his two girls, his mother or Teresa's.
That's exactly what I want, is what's best for my girls.
In a rare move, the family court hearing was open to cameras. Lawyers asked Mark about accusations he made negative comments about Teresa's mom.
Negatively, I don't think so, ma'am. I think accurately would be a better choice of words.
The judge didn't buy his argument and granted permanent custody to Teresa's mom.
These kids celebrated their first Christmas just a couple of months ago without their mother, and now their father's off in shackles on his way to jail, where he belongs, frankly.
Now, the little girls have lost both their parents, their mother to an assassin's hammer, and their father, who could be executed if he's convicted.
I have to talk to her every day. She was my mentor.
And in Bonita Springs, Teresa's nurse, Sandra Hoskins, thinks of her mentor every day and keeps her old stethoscope sorely missing her boss and friend.
I'm glad she gets justice.